Hey guys, welcome back. Charles Damiano here from the Bruce Lee Collection, and I have a special guest with me here today, my friend Alex Richter.
Nice to see you, Charles.
Sifu Alex Richter. Good having you, man. I know we did this about a year ago. We talked everything Bruce Lee on your background, so I really appreciate you coming here today. You have a very Bruce Lee extensive background, Wing Chun extensive background, so I have a lot of fun questions for you today on Bruce Lee, Wing Chun. I'd like to catch up on you. Maybe at the end we'll talk about what you've been doing, because so much has been going on in your life as well.
Yes.
And I think the fans will find that very interesting. So to start out, I want to start first with Bruce Lee questions, and I also asked some of my fans to give in some questions. So I have some here from the fans of the channel, which is a big crossover between your channel and mine.
Right.
And they came up with some interesting questions that I'm excited to ask you in a minute.
Let's go.
So on your channel, how did you come up with the whole Q&A on your channel, and when did that start? Because that's a nice part of your channel now.
Well, I think about 7 episodes in, Dre and I realized, like, wow, every single time we do an episode, we have to come up with a topic.
Yeah.
And I have to, like, kind of plan out what I'm discussing. But we keep getting questions in the comments, like, what do you think about this? Or what is my opinion on that? I go, we could start doing these AMAs, these Ask Me Anything episodes. And then we did a few of those, and then I would have a couple topics in between, and then I'm like, it's just way easier to do the Ask Me Anything episodes.
It definitely makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Less planning involved.
Yeah.
So getting into the first question, this didn't come from a fan. It's kind of a question that I came up with, and it's on Bruce Lee, and I wanted to get your opinion as to, why do you feel Bruce Lee had such a profound impact, not only on your life, because I know he changed the course of your life from the other episodes that we listened to, but on people's lives around the world.
Yeah, well, obviously Bruce Lee's very unique, and he has the primacy effect. Mm-hmm. He was the first one to do it. And you have Bruce Lee as a martial artist, you have Bruce Lee as a film star, you have Bruce Lee as a, pioneer of self-actualization and philosophy, and so there's obviously crossover between all 3 of those things, but many fans tend to latch on to one or the other, or a few of them, and so there's many different aspects of Bruce Lee that are quite appealing to people. Yeah. And I think that is part of his appeal. Also, he, quite frankly, he was the first one to do it. So he is the bar by which everyone who comes after is going to be measured against. And the whole idea of, like, remember after Bruce Lee passed away in the 70s, it was like, they even had that tournament in Madison Square Garden. Who's going to be the next Bruce Lee? As if somehow winning a karate tournament is now everyone's going to go, well, he's the new Bruce Lee, right? The problem is that that's so laughable, because no one else can do what he did because he was the first. Yeah, so no matter how good someone is, people could be better fighters, bigger, stronger, be able to do better stunts, whatever. If you look at people like Scott Adkins, when you look at their martial arts skill, he's doing things that Bruce Lee could never do on the screen. But there's still something where you're going to go, but he's not the next Bruce Lee, because Bruce Lee was the one who smashed those doors down. Yeah. And so I think that that's part of the reason why I think he has such a big effect, and he cannot be duplicated. Yeah. And the other thing is, we didn't see an old Bruce Lee. To be fair, he did die kind of at the peak of his powers. Yes. We don't know what a 50-year-old declining Bruce Lee, who maybe had some kind of scandal or something happen that, caused people to lose respect for him. Yeah. And we never had to see any of that. We saw him kind of as this we all have this idea of him from Way the Dragon or Enter the Dragon, and then it ends there, this 32-year-old Bruce Lee. So he kind of also has that. Because if you think about it, when you have other stars like Van Damme, if Van Damme made Kickboxer, Bloodsport, Cyborg, a couple other movies, and then if he had a very untimely...
Which were all great movies.
Movies. If he had an untimely passing, not that I'm advocating that, he's lived obviously beyond that, but if he had an untimely passing right after those 3-4 first movies he made, everyone would look at Van Damme completely differently. Yeah, that's a good point. Because you wouldn't have seen Van Damme, go through all the struggles that big actors go through in Hollywood, and go through this kind of decline, and become a straight-to-video action star, right? Yeah. So I think that, and not to say that necessarily would have happened with Bruce Lee, but I think, that is part of the reason, we only got to see the man at his peak. Yeah, it's kind of like Jimmy Dean and Marilyn Monroe, all those who ended their life early, right? You tend to remember them more. Right. And that's how you remember them, in that young, vibrant state. Absolutely. That's a really good point. I always say Elvis died 10 years too late. I know. Right? Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's horrible, but it's true.
So along the same lines, I know you answered that really nicely. What do you think made him so special and universally loved, not just in the United States, but like all around the world? Like he appealed to everyone. Why do you think he had that universal appeal?
Well, I think because it's probably a little bit different for everyone, but obviously for like a lot of men, he kind of represented that total package badass. Where he was like in control of himself. He was able to whoop ass. He was cool. The ladies loved him, right?
They really did.
Yes.
I mean,
and so I think that there's something very appealing about this kind of one guy who's able to be like all the epitome of all of these things, right?
To everyone.
You know, you have it's kind of like that James Bond effect, like where he's just so loved by women and smooth and intelligent and all that kind of stuff. The difference is he was doing without any technology. All right, he wasn't a badass because he had a gun or he had a bunch of gadgets. The Q didn't give him a bunch of gadgets, right?
What do you know about Han? He lives like a king on that island, totally self-sufficient. I gather you still don't have enough to bust up his operation. We know everything. We can prove nothing. We want you to go in there as our agent.
Right. He goes to Han's island. He says, "Well, I guess I won't need anything."
Anything.
All right. Okay. Right.
That was pretty good.
All right. So he wasn't going there with a bunch of gadgets on his belt or something like that, and he was just going in there like with his two hands and 2 feet. Right. And I think there's something kind of appealing, whether that's realistic or not is another question, but there's something kind of like it's just him, baby.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I agree with you there. He went in just with bare hands and a few of the weapons that
occasional
he used.
chucks.
Occasional chucks, but you've never seen that prior to that. Everyone was using guns and technology and the whole James Bond effect, and he had that, but it was just bare hands, and I think it resonates with certain people that when you go down just the raw essence. I mean, to battle like that, and look like that, and have that charisma on screen. It's just like, how could you not love the guy? It's like crazy. Even women say they found him sexy. I always love when I see comments. They're like, "Oh, he's so sexy." Right. It's like you don't see it as a guy, but women, he appealed to women as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy. So now this next question is from an actual fan of mine, and he wrote in, and his name is Marvin Rose. So Marvin, shout out to you, man. And he says that he really likes your Wing Chun and thinks you're great, and so do I, man. You do a great job with that.
You.
And then he asked what your thoughts are on the Hong Kong actor who I never really heard of, but I know you probably have. His name is Chan Wai-man or Wai-man, W-A-I man.
Chan Wai-man.
Yeah, so you've heard of him.
Yes, I've heard of him.
So what can you tell us about him? Because he was interesting to hear your input on that. Thoughts on that?
I've talked about Chan Wai-man on the podcast a few times. Chan Wai-man is an absolute badass. He's someone that I would love to have the chance to meet in Hong Kong.
Okay.
I'm usually not super starstruck when I meet certain people, but he's one of those guys that I think if I met him, I would be stumbling over my words a little bit. Oh, really? Yeah, because he is a very interesting character for a number of reasons. Okay. One, he's a legit martial artist. He was an actual fighter. He first learned a very traditional style of martial art called Tam Ga Sam Chin, which is a southern Chinese martial art that's related to Okinawan karate. Okay. So it's a very kind of hard style. And he was a student of one of the most famous masters of that art called Tam Hon, who was also the long pole king of 7 provinces. All right, which is a cool title to have. I want to be the long pole king of 7 provinces.
But it's not long pole of Wing Chun because he didn't study Wing Chun, right?
No.
It's just another.
It's a southern style long pole. Same style of long pole, but different. They use in Wing Chun we use a narrow grip. They use the more traditional wide grip. Okay. But he was Tam Hong was good friends with my teacher Sifu Alex Richter. That's why I know a little bit about that background. And Chan Wai-man eventually got into like boxing and kickboxing, and then became like a legit fighter with wins under his belt. Wow. On top of later becoming a movie star. Now the interesting thing about Chan Wai-man is he became a police officer in Hong Kong in real life. But he was shortly kicked off the police force because he has triad connections. And it's very well known, in fact he openly admits it, that he was a triad boss for quite a while. He was a triad boss of one section of Hong Kong known as Tim Sa Tsui, which is where in the southern tip of Kowloon, and Kimberley Road in particular was his street. There was a saying that if you were like ever in trouble on that street, you would just need to yell Chan Wai-man's name 3 times and a horde of people would come out ready to help you, right? So he's interesting because he was kind of like a mafia boss.
Yeah.
He was an actor. He did a bunch of films. He started
any one film that really sticks out in your mind that he did that any of us would know about?
Well, he kind of like covered the gamut in terms of films. He was in some very early low budget films.
Oh, okay. Were they mostly out of Hong Kong?
They're all out of Hong Kong.
Out of Hong Kong.
Where they were kind of pushing him as the star, and then later he became more of a villain.
Okay.
In Shaw Brothers films, have you ever seen Five Elemental Ninja? He's in that film. He's the villainous ninja there. He's also played villain in Jackie Chan movies and stuff.
Okay.
And he still acts now. He has a very raspy voice.
Oh, does he?
In Cantonese, so he feels like a Chinese equivalent of an Italian mafia boss. Like when he talks, he has like the Cantonese equivalent of talking
like
a little bit like this.
Godfather.
Yes. So when you hear interviews with him, he's like that. He was friends with Bruce Lee, and despite his massive fighting prowess, he said Bruce Lee was kind of like one of the guys he wouldn't mess with.
Really?
And it also seemed that the feeling was mutual, that Bruce also had respect for Chan Wai-man as a fighter.
Wow.
So the two of them, there's press conference, I think it's for Fist of the Unicorn, where you can see the two of them together.
That great movie that they made, right? That they put out.
Right.
Kidding.
And there's been some speculation that Chan Wai-man had something to do with Bruce Lee's death, but this is just because most Westerners who don't know anything about the Haksewui, about the Chinese triads, the moment you say triad, someone is a triad, oh, he knew Bruce, oh, he must have something to do with it, right? Yeah. But that's just, when they say things like that, that's just to have zero understanding of how these triads work. And to think that Chan Wai-man had something to do with Bruce Lee's death is ridiculous. Because they actually had a mutual respect for each other. There's part of the speculations, because after Bruce Lee died, they made a film with Chan Wai-man, and they photoshopped Chan Wai-man's head on Unicorn Chan. Oh, wow. And it's that photo where Unicorn Chan is doing like a Pax-Out back fist on Bruce Lee. Right?
Yeah, and that famous magazine cover that they're on. I love that photo.
It's just a photo shoot, right? And they put Chan Wai-man's head on there to make it seem like he was back-fisting Bruce Lee, and they're like, oh, but see, the problem is they see something like that, which is the movie company, and they go, the Singhoi movie company wanted to make Bruce Lee look bad, therefore Chan Wai-man had something to do with his death. So when you kind of like put this stuff together, you go, come on. But if you don't know who Chan Wai-man is, all right, and you never heard of Chan Wai-man before, I will suggest watching one video.
Which one is that?
And this video is in the 1980s. Okay, so Chan Wai-man was already, as we like to say in New York, no spring chicken at this point. He was already a movie star. He had done a bunch of movies. He's not in his prime of his fighting career. He decides to go in the ring and fight against a high-level Japanese kickboxer.
Okay.
When he's already like a comfortable movie star, he's done, his fighting days are past. And he's in the ring. In his corner is Carter Wong. You know who Carter Wong is at Big Trouble in Little China, all that, right? Yeah. And so it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, here's the movie sar with like another movie star guy in his corner. Like, oh my God. And then there's like some Japanese killer on the other side of the ring. You're like, oh, this is going to look that good. And Chan Wai-man knocks this guy out in the first round. Really? Yeah, and he's got all the tattoos because he's a triad member. He's badass. You see those tattoos and you go, oh, this is Haksewui. This is what the Chinese call the black societies. They don't really call them triads in Chinese. That's actually an anglicized way of talking about gangsters. In Hong Kong, they call them Haksewui, which means the black societies. Wow. So he has all these tattoos. You see that and you go, this is a black society member. Wow. And he goes in there and he's just got this beautiful straight punch that he lands right while the Japanese fighter's giving him a kick. And you have to realize this is after he's made a bunch of movies. Yeah. He's past his prime. Chan Wai-man is a certified badass. Wow. And there are a couple interviews with him on YouTube. They're in Cantonese, but they have subtitles where he talks about gangster life. He talks about Bruce Lee. Really interesting stuff. When Brandon Lee came to Hong Kong to start making films, like Legacy of Rage, Laser Mission, Legacy Rage. He met, I think it was Laser Mission was the first one, and he met Chan Wai-man over there. Oh, he did. Chan Wai-man was not very impressed with Brandon because Chan Wai-man knew his father. And he felt that Brandon was not being serious, and Brandon didn't really understand his father's legacy.
Yeah.
And there's a story that basically Chan Wai-man kind of like grabbed Brandon and kind of like had a stern talking to him. It was like, you have to understand who your father is.
Wow.
And you have to step it up.
See that? Out of respect for Bruce Lee, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and basically told him. Now there are other stories like he slapped Brandon. So I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But that he basically had a very stern talking to, and supposedly after that conversation, Brandon got super serious, and that was kind of a change for him.
Wow.
So Chan Wai-man is a very important person.
Wow, look at that. Well,
Bruce Lee's story.
I'm glad you shared that. What's the name of the video again? And can you still pick that up? Because I'd like to rent that or see if I can.
Which video?
That. The one that he was in, the DVD you said he was in, that one video. He said you said if you're going to watch one video.
Oh, no, that's on YouTube.
Oh, that's on YouTube.
Just type in Chan Wai-man kickboxing
Okay,
match.
okay. And you can see that. All right, I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, that's fantastic. Wow, that was an interesting story, Alex. Thank you for sharing that, man. All right, I have another question from you. This one's from Trevor Smith, another fan of my channel. And he wrote, did Bruce Lee study any form of Kung Fu named Hung Gar prior to his studying of Wing Chun? And then he wanted to know if you knew if he studied any other Kung Fu styles that you were aware of.
I've never heard about Bruce Lee studying Hong Ga or Hong Kun before he did Wing Chun, or even afterwards for that matter. Bruce Lee did have some martial arts training in other styles prior to coming to the U.S. Obviously, he had done a little bit of Tai Chi with his father, but people always say, oh, well, he really first learned Tai Chi.
He dabbled in it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, just like learning how to do some basic Tai Chi movements doesn't mean he's learning how to stop a jab, punch, kick, or anything like that. Like, people kind of conflate. It's not like his father was teaching him punch defense.
Right, exactly.
His father was teaching him
more
probably
of a form of health and fitness, right? Yeah,
form, right?
Yep.
So really, it was there are many different accounts. Everyone who knew Bruce Lee in the 50s wants to claim that they're the one that brought Bruce Lee to Yip Man, right? Or they were brought to Yip Man by Bruce Lee, right? It's kind of the common trope. For whatever reason, Bruce Lee was impressed with Wing Chun, perhaps because of William Cheung, perhaps because of other people, and then came to learn Wing Chun, right? Because he wanted basically just to be a street fighter. He wasn't doing it for self-actualization or to become in harmony with the Tao or anything like that, as people like to think. I mean, he was a punky teenager who wanted to fight, right? But while he was practicing Wing Chun, he had a little bit of interest in boxing. That's where we have the famous fight where he beat Gary Elms in the kind of like inter-high school, intramural boxing match, and Gary Elms came from King George V, which was like a private school, and he had lots of British kids there, and Bruce Lee, he was he was in St. Francis Xavier already. Yeah. And so he learned a little bit of boxing, but he more or less did Wing Chun. I mean, he
wanted to test the Wing Chun out in the ring back then, right? Because he was studying Wing Chun, and he won that match, right?
He did. But he did not knock out Gary Elms, which bothered him. He, later, it's part of the reason why he felt that there were some limitations in sport fighting, like the boxing gloves and everything like that. But, for people who want to say, oh, Bruce Lee never had a real fight, it's like, I think everyone who ever said Bruce Lee didn't have a real fight hasn't even had an amateur boxing match with someone.
Exactly.
It's like, you need to shut up.
Exactly.
Right? He had that experience, but shortly before he came to the States, whether it was that fight he had with one of, there's a famous master in Hong Kong who passed away. I know his son, Long Chi-chun. Long Chi-chun was a northern Shaolin master. His son, Long Hai-ming, is someone that I know personally. Oh, wow. But Long Chi-chun had a student, and Bruce Lee fought one of Long Chi-chun's students. And the reason why we know this is because it's in his Daytimer. When you see Linda Lee's book, Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew, she actually has these excerpts from his Daytimers in the 50s. And he talks about the Gary Elms fight. And then just a few weeks later, he says he had a fight with a student of Long Chi-chun on Union Road in Kowloon City.
It wasn't on the rooftop shows here about.
It could be on the rooftops. You know why they fought on rooftops?
So that the police wouldn't know?
So the police wouldn't, so no one would see them fighting, right? That was the whole thing. Because most Hong Kong buildings have a rooftop with a ledge where you can go up there, right? So, and in Bruce Lee's Daytimer, he says that he he eventually knocked that guy down and out and knocked a tooth out. But he was like, but I got a black eye. And it seemed like it bothered him that he got a black eye from this fight, right? So this idea that, Bruce never had any real fights, when like within a few weeks he had a boxing match which he won, and then another fight against another Chinese martial arts practitioner where he knocks that guy down and out and knocks his tooth out, but also admits that he got a black eye, which means it's a real fight. Yeah. And so shortly before he came to the States, he told his friend Hawkins Chow, he says, I'm going to go to the States and I'll probably teach Kung Fu to earn a living. And Hawkins Chung, his classmates, kind of laughed at him and says, well, Bruce, you really don't know that much Wing Chun. You only know like Siu Nam Tao and Chum Kyu and some Chi Sao and basic movements. What are you going to teach? And then Bruce got the idea to learn some like additional Kung Fu stuff so he could kind of like wow the audience.
Is that where he learned the praying mantis form that you saw
like those
him use
kind of
in the
things,
demonstrations
right?
and the tournaments
and Enter
the Dragon?
Yeah.
And he always had that one go-to form that looked amazing. So he learned that for those reasons, more to be...
Yes, and he learned that from one of his father's friends, a master named Siu Hon Sang. And Siu Hon Sang was also kind of a small-time movie actor who also was in films with Sekin Han from Enter the Dragon. Yeah. And this was a friend of his father's. And so shortly before he came to the States, he learned a couple of those forms. One of those forms was called Jeet Kune.
Wow, how close is that to
Jeet Kune? Right?
No.
Although the Jeet is not the same as intercept. It's a different character, but pronounced almost identically. And then he learned a couple, like Gong Lik Kune, and then he learned a couple of like those crane movements and those mantis movements. So he learned that very quickly. And supposedly he was going to learn that stuff from Uncle Siu, and then in return he was going to teach Uncle Siu some cha-cha moves. Yeah. And then, but Bruce ended up learning that Kung Fu stuff so quickly, and he ended up not teaching any cha-cha moves to Uncle Siu, and then he left. And so anytime you kind of saw Bruce bust those shapes, that's basically what he learned from Uncle Siu in the few weeks before he left Hong Kong. That shows you what a quick study
learned.
It was, right? And later there are people who try to pretend that it was a guy named Fuk Yeung in Seattle that taught Bruce Lee all that stuff. But those were not those contemporary opera styles that they supposedly claim was the real secret Wing Chun that Bruce Lee learned. That stuff he learned from Uncle Siu Hon Sang. And there's like a contingency of, like, I call them Fuk Young cultists in Seattle that want to pretend that everything Bruce Lee did that wasn't from Yip Man was from this one guy. And it's not true. When you see him busting those shapes, like in the screen test. Or sometimes in the demonstration in Long Beach where he's doing those kicks. That is most likely what he learned from Siu Hon Sang.
I read so many times that, after they used to teach Bruce the forms, within a matter of a week or two, they would come back and say, he now performs the form better than I do, right? That's how quick of a learner he was and how he perfected it.
And I have a small theory. It's just my theory, so it could totally be wrong, and I'm willing for it to be wrong, but it's just my little theory.
What's that?
When you look at the story of the Wong Jack Man fight, where Bruce Lee, it started where he gave a demonstration in San Francisco, and like the demonstration got kind of out of hand, and some people got pissed off and all that kind of stuff. Siu Hon Sang, the guy who taught him those forms, was from the Jingwu Academy. Jingwu Academy, oddly enough, is the school that Fist of Fury was at, right? And that was a real school.
And they mentioned that, the Jingwu school.
And they have these standard forms that you learn before you specialize. So you learn, I think they call it the Jingwu 10. And they have these 10 forms you learn, which could be considered like generic Kung Fu forms, if there is such a thing. And then once you learn those 10 forms, you can then specialize in Praying Mantis or Eagle Claw or whatever. That was essentially the track in most of the Jingwu schools. That's why many Praying Mantis schools and Eagle Claw schools have the same basic 10 forms because they come from Jingwu. And those basic 10 forms are not necessarily Praying Mantis or Eagle Claw based. They're just like these forms you have to learn first before you specialize in those styles. That was the Jingwu setup. So Bruce Lee learned some of those Jingwu basic 10 forms. And my speculation is, because the famous thing about that San Francisco demonstration is Bruce came out and busted out this form, and everyone kind of claps, and he basically says, pardon my French, that's all bullshit. And then goes and demonstrates some Wing Chun kind of like more direct stuff, right? And then people got upset because people in the audience, like, he just kind of crapped on traditional Kung Fu. The reason why I think they personally got offended is because Wong Jack Man, from one of the articles I read, had learned those Jing Wu forms. So when Bruce demonstrated whatever Kung Fu form he did, dollars to donuts, it was one of the Jing Wu forms.
So he took offense to it.
Because Bruce Lee performed it so well.
And then he puts it down.
You have to imagine someone busts out this amazing form and then everyone's like, and he goes, and that's a load of crap. And he does it better than some of those guys who actually teach that style. And then you start to see why it's personal.
Wow.
But that's just my theory.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Probably
though.
wrong, but it could be right.
Hey, it could be. Well, I'd like to hear from you guys. If you have anything you want to add to that story, you know anything about it, please chime in. Let us know.
Tell me how wrong I am.
Yeah, that's a great story. Well, this leads into the next question then, man. It's funny how everything you just mentioned shows how Bruce Lee was evolving at that time. I mean, from the boxing match to the other match, it was all like, okay, well, that lasted too long. I shouldn't have got a black eye.
Right.
Everything was pissing him off to develop this ultimate style where he wanted to finish a fight within 10 seconds of the fight.
Yes.
And he was already pre-planning that in his mind, that Wing Chun was just not the one way to go, right?
Yes.
It was evolving since that point. Wow, interesting. So another fan of the channel mentions, his name is Anderson Escobar. So shout out to you, Anderson, and thanks for this question. He says, and this leads into what you were just talking about. Do you think that Bruce Lee beat Wong Jack Man in their fight back in the day? And have you heard any first-hand or second-hand stories on that fight from people who actually witnessed it? So what do you think of that fight? Do you feel that Bruce Lee won that fight? I mean, those who witnessed it say he did.
Right.
What's your thought on that?
So I think first, when it comes to expert opinions, I think everyone needs to chill a little bit because it doesn't matter.
Stay tuned for part 2 as we continue our discussion with Sifu Alex Richter on the Bruce Lee Wong Jack Man fight. Also hear Alex's response to the question, was Bruce Lee a real fighter, or was he just a movie star who knew how to set up fights on screen? And enjoy Alex sharing some of his new Bruce Lee collectibles with us, and much more coming soon.